oak casks to mature our whiskies. We use American white oak or the Quercus alba and European white oak or the Quercus robur. So the American comes from Missouri and the European comes from Galicia in northern Spain. We use two main types of cask to mature our whiskies. The first one is this one here. This is an ex-bourbon barrel. So this one has a capacity of 200 litres. It was made by one of the cooperages we source from in the United States, and before sending them to the bourbon distilleries in Kentucky, they char the inside of the barrel with fire. So you can see the blackening and the cracks here. That's in order to open up plenty of cracks and crevices for the bourbon and subsequently the whiskey to soak into and absorb all of that wood character. They're then sent to the bourbon distilleries, and in the United States it's the law that they have to use virgin oak barrels every time they mature. So a new barrel every time. So once the bourbon is matured, that's emptied, we get shipped the casks whole and they're filled right away with our distillate. And we like to use these barrels which have already been used for something else because of the flavours they give the whiskey. So the bourbon barrels typically impart flavours of caramel, butterscotch and vanilla, so a nice sweetness. The second main type of cask we use is this larger one here. This is an ex-sherry butt. This one has a capacity of 500 litres. This was made by the cooperage in Jerez in Spain, and then they're sent to sherry bodegas around Spain to mature the Oloroso sherry inside for about 2 years. Then that's emptied, we get the casks and they're filled with our distillate. And the sherry butts impart flavours of dried fruits and nuts to the whiskey, so raisins, dates, sultanas, figs, things like that. Whiskies like Redbreast would have a huge sherry butt influence. So they're the two main types of cask. To a lesser extent, we do use other types, and we're increasingly innovating. Like we've used stout and beer barrels for our Jameson cask mates. We've used French wine barrels, Malaga casks, port pipes, Hungarian oak. But generally, it's these two that are used for most of our whiskies. These are used for Jameson in the green bottle, for example. So even though we don't make the casks from scratch on site generally because, of course, we're using these seasoned barrels that we source from elsewhere, we still do have a team of coopers working in the distillery. And if you look to the photograph on the wall, you see our coopers. The gentleman on the left, and you can see him in these photos as well here, is our head cooper. His name is Ger Buckley. And Ger is a 5th generation cooper, so it's a trade often passed down through the generations. Along with the tools as well, he uses a lot of tools that his grandfather would have used. And their main function is for cask maintenance and repair. They individually inspect all of the barrels we receive to make sure we're using the very highest grade possible, because they do have a huge influence on the final whiskey. We're now going to move down and see what happens when we actually fill the barrels with the distillate. On we go. Where we store privately owned barrels. So we have what's called a cask circle program here in Midleton, whereby if you're a big whiskey fan, you can actually purchase your very own barrel of fine whiskey, and we keep it maturing here, and then you can bottle it when you like. So quite a cool thing to have. Yeah. So after the still house, we have our distillates, the pot still at 84% and the grain at 94%. They're not filled into the casks at these percentages, it's too strong for the wood. So purified water is added to reduce the distillate to 63% before maturation. Now I'm going to show you the different stages of maturation. So if you first look at that cask down there on the left hand side, you'll see this has recently been filled with new make spirit. So it's still quite clear yet, hasn't had time to interact with the wood, it's not legally a whiskey yet. But you can see after 3 years, it is now legally a whiskey. And you can see it's soaked up that colour from the cask. That's where whiskey gets its nice golden colour. Then moving on to a 6-year-old. That's about the age of Jameson Original in the green bottle. So that's typically the colour you'd see coming out of that bottle. Then on to 12 years old, it gets darker again. And if you leave it for 18 years, you end up with this nice deep amber shade.
Oh, yeah.
That's because of all of the tannins in the wood, which lend their colour and of course their flavour. You'll also notice something else happening as maturation occurs, and that's that the quantity is reducing. Why do you think that is? Evaporation, exactly. And for bonus points, otherwise known as?
The angel share.
The angels share, exactly. So we have very drunk angels here in Midleton. They're stealing 2% of our whiskey every year, so that by the time we have an 18-year-old whiskey, we've potentially lost up to 40% of the original liquid to evaporation. And there's nothing that can be done to capture that, so that might explain to you some of the higher price points of some of the older whiskies. Once maturation is complete, the master blender then comes along, and he decides to what varying degrees, what cask types hold in what whiskey types he wants to marry together to create the final brand or expression. And that's what allows us to have so many different flavours. The art of that is really in the blending. Typically, before bottling, demineralised water is added to the whiskey, so it's cut, to reduce it from cask strength, which is 58 to 62%, right down to about 40% or 80 proof. That's typically bottling strength. We do have exceptions to that, however. We also sell and bottle some cask strength whiskies. One of those is this one here. It's our Jameson Black Barrel at cask strength. Now the Black Barrel at 40% you can find quite widespread, but at cask strength, 60% or 120 proof, it's only exclusive to us here in the distillery in Midleton and in Dublin. And with this you can actually bottle it yourself. Pull it directly from a live cask that's maturing and handwrite your label. So it's quite a fun experience. And also Black Barrel is a nice sweet whiskey because it's some of the whiskey is finished in double charred bourbon barrels. That caramelizes a lot of the sugars left in the wood, leading to a sweeter and more vanilla caramel whiskey.
Nice,
so it's quite nice. We also have a second whiskey that's exclusive to us here. This is not cask strength, this is 40%. This is the Jameson Distillery Edition. And with this you can print a personalised name on the label. So quite nice for a gift. For example, for a nice tour guide you might know. E-T-E-L. That's just for your own information because we get a lot of questions every day about what can't you get elsewhere, what can you only get here. So there's two that you can only get here. So if you have any questions about them, my colleagues in the gift shop would be happy to help you out with that. We're now going to move on to the next part of the tour, which is a really nice part because we're going to enter into a live maturation warehouse where we currently have barrels of whiskey actually maturing. So let me tell you to breathe deeply in here. The aromas and the angel's share is just lovely. We're going to just, stroll through, enjoy the angel's share. Any questions along the way, feel free to ask me. I'll be kind of walking and talking a bit about the barrels as we're in there. And then we're going to move on and do a comparative whiskey tasting. So the moment you've all been waiting for. Also, just guys, I'd ask you not to have any flash photography in this part. While we're in there, obviously after that it's fine again. But just while we're in with the barrels. So we'll head on in then.
Wait. The angel share is free.
Nice. So like a lot of the smells in here are like oak, but also the alcohol, of course.
And the angel share is free.
Yes. Very important.
It smells nice, yeah.
Just going to pause it.
Can't we be drunk?
What's that?
Oh, yes, you could. Actually, probably.
It's like an ambient temperature. It's not actually controlled because we don't get any extremes in temperature in Ireland, so it's not something we have to worry about too much. For example, in Kentucky or Tennessee, they would have to control the temperature a lot more because they get quite hot summers. But here we don't. We have a good climate for it, so they just keep it at whatever ambient temperature is in the warehouse. So yeah.
I'm just wondering one thing. Is there a reason? Is it because of the economy or what that alcohol, like the Jamesons, are 40? Because a lot of times it's 43%.
The thing with the 40 years, I suppose there's a lot of studies been done to show it's maybe most palatable like that, because
Okay.
you'd be surprised at that level of alcohol, even a jump of 3% can actually, I suppose, have a lot more of a kick to it.
Yeah.
And I suppose they found that that's kind of more palatable for most people. Also, the reason for bringing whiskey up to 43% is that they don't have to chill filter it after that. So chill filtering is a process whereby they filter the whiskey so that it won't be cloudy when you put ice into it and it
Yeah.
gets cold.
Yeah.
And a lot of real like whiskey connoisseurs don't like chill filtering, so if they bring up the alcohol percentage, that cloudiness isn't a problem, so they don't chill filter that.
Yeah, non-chill filtered, yeah.
So guys, sorry to keep you waiting there. So these barrels were filled in 2014, meaning they're now 5 years old. They're going to rest about another 2 or 3 years and eventually be commercialized, perhaps into a small batch release. This is just a small taster of what we have maturing right now. So there's roughly around 800 barrels in here, majority bourbon, but you see some sherry butts at either end. But in our large site behind us, there's currently 1.5 million barrels maturing. So they're on their side here just because of the height restriction of the warehouse, but they're stacked straight up in the larger warehouses, and sometimes they could be 20, 30 high. On the outside of some of the barrels, something interesting to point out, might look like whiskey leaking out. It's not actually whiskey, that's actually the sap from the oak that's being pushed out as the whiskey expands. And of course then the lovely oak and alcohol aromas from the Angel's Share.
Here are the sherry ones. Oh, that was good.